Fantastic. And then final question, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to recruiting and or retaining volunteers? We will be putting these challenges to the panel at the end. So if you need any top tips or if you have any big challenges, please pop them in and hopefully we'll be able to support with that. So I can see a lot about capacity, communication with volunteers, keeping them engaged and motivated, keeping them retained for longer than 6 months, retaining them once they've secured paid work, recruiting young people. Sorry, my things are in the way. Capacity, time, and if I press space, this is
like you want to tune in.
Yeah. Lovely. If you can just pop yourself on mute if you're not speaking. Thank you. Lovely. So I will have a look at these and then I will bring them back to the panel shortly. So today on the panel, we'll be joined by Carol from the AVOCADO Foundation, Ellie from Hope for the Young, Janet from Reach Volunteering, and Maddy from Family Volunteering Club. And rather than me do the introductions, I'm going to pass over to Karen and our panel. And I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. It's great to have so many people online joining us today. I'm Karen Mangan. I'm volunteering manager for the City of London Corporation. Just to give you a little bit of context about my role and the City of London Corporation. So Corporation is quite a unique and historic organisation with a governing body for the square mile, but we also deliver a wide array of services from looking after our police to managing schools, maintaining over 11,000 acres of green spaces such as Epping Forest, Hampstead Heath, and we are also the sole trustee of the City Bridge Foundation, of which we're really proud of the work that they do in the community in supporting Londoners. My role as volunteering manager is to oversee our employee volunteering programme. So we offer 14 hours for our volunteers for our staff to volunteer with a range of social and environmental causes. We also have hundreds of volunteers supporting the work that we do and making a really important contribution to our open spaces, our cultural and heritage sites, for example, the Guildhall Library, the London Archives, and also in the community. So we really recognise the power of volunteering and the contribution that volunteering makes in terms of developing and supporting our communities, adding value, developing skills and talent, and also creating innovation. So it's my pleasure today. We've got a really interesting and important topic. How do we retain and recruit volunteers who are the lifeblood of everything that we do? And you as volunteer managers are involved in that will be able to share and learn insights. And that's really what I'm here for today as well. And we have a really excellent panel for you from across the voluntary sector. And what I'd like to do is just ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and their role and just say a little bit about the organisation that they work with. So can I start with Maddy?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me, Karen?
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful. Nice to be in the virtual room with you all this morning. So I'm Maddy and I run a charity called Family Volunteering Club. So we are, we've been running actually since 2019 as a not-for-profit originally, and then we got charity status last year. But essentially our programme is about creating and delivering child-friendly volunteering sessions. So we work with children aged 0 to 9, and we work in partnership with gardening projects, food banks, baby clothes banks, homeless charities, and we create accessible and fun family-friendly volunteering sessions for kids to come along and do with their grown-ups. So we started in South London, where the project is still growing, and we're starting to kind of build our work in other geographic places around the UK. So we're currently in South Wales, in Abergavenny, in Stevenage, in Fenland, near Peterborough, and we're sort of developing to sort of hopefully have national impact, but also developing our work in London in the coming years too.
Lovely. Thank you, Maddy. Really interesting work that you're doing there, particularly in terms of recruiting and developing our kind of future volunteers. I look forward to kind of learning more about kind of the way in which you're recruiting and supporting those volunteers and those young volunteers in the work you do. Thank you. Let's introduce, I'm going to hand over to Carol. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the Avocado Foundation?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. Really, really pleased. My name is Carol Akiwumi, and I'm the CEO and founder of the AVOCADO Foundation. Although you might have encountered us previously, since 2014 as Money for Youth, and then when we expanded in 2020 as Money for You, and then this year rebranded to become the AVOCADO Foundation to align, with our vision and values, as well as better reflect our mission. And we're simply here to eradicate economic inequalities. So what we do really is equip individuals, organizations, businesses and nonprofits with essential financial education, entrepreneurship training, and capacity building programs. And our work is strongest here in London. More than half of our 1,000-strong active service users are here. At the heart of our work is the commitment to build resilient, empowered communities that can thrive and inspire positive change, people who can be architects of their own transformation without creating, any kind of dependency. So yeah, I'm really excited about this because on the journey, I can say that we've had more active volunteers help to build this organization up to where it is today. And so it's really central to the success of community organizations like ours.
Thank you, Carol. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Like you say, volunteers go on these journeys with us, don't they, with our organisations, and really have a massive impact in terms of how they're shaped and developed. And we can look a little bit more about that sort of skill-based volunteering and how we use those and how we work with those skill-based volunteers. Can I hand over to Ellie Alvarez from Hope for the Young? Ellie, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here today. So yeah, my name is Ellie and I work for Hope for the Young. We are a smallish charity based in London, and we support young refugees and asylum seekers aged 16 to 25. And one half of Hope for the Young is we provide a mentoring program to young people. And this is really powered by our amazing volunteers. So they are kind of central to this program. We match volunteer mentors with a young person, and then they work with them to achieve their educational or personal development goals. The other half of Hope for the Young is we run a grants and advocacy program. So again, this is really to address any financial barriers that young people might face to access education. So yeah, and in the past year, we've doubled in size. So we've gone from having a volunteer base of around 80 to now 170. So yeah, we've done lots of volunteer recruitment and we've kind of trialed lots of different things. So I'm really excited to be able to share what we've learned along the way today.
Lovely. Thank you, Ellie. We know that volunteer mentors make a really big difference to lots of different community groups, young people, in terms of helping them to develop their confidence, to build their skills and move them through quite often sometimes transitioning times where they need an extra bit of help. So really keen to hear about how you've managed to grow and expand so quickly. And can I just hand over now to Janet as well? Good morning, Janet.
Hi. Really lovely to be here, and always pleased to be talking volunteering, and really with some great panelists as well. So I'm Janet. I'm from Reach Volunteering. I'm the Chief Exec of Reach Volunteering, and we're a national charity that basically focuses on skills-based volunteering, which we define as 3 or more years experience in the skills that you are wanting to volunteer or are asking for volunteers to come with, on the basis that we know that organizations, particularly smaller organizations, need to extend their networks to be able to get more expertise into their charities. And basically the primary thing we do is run an online platform, which is a bit like a sort of two-sided marketplace. It's a bespoke platform built specifically to enable volunteer recruitment. Volunteers can create profiles, they can search for roles, they can get email digests. and charities and organizations can upload roles, and their roles then get shared actually beyond our community, right through to LinkedIn and Restless and Escape the City and other partners. But also they can then approach people on our platform who've got profiles, volunteers, and ask them to apply. And then we also provide guidance, particularly in trustee recruitment. And we run campaigns. We ran a campaign last year, Volunteer for Climate. We're going to do a little mini campaign in a couple of weeks to coincide with Black Friday called Citizen Friday, like take action. And to give you, we cover every range of skill from accountancy through to web design, and we do operate nationally, but we do a lot of work in London. We give you a sense of scale. About 14,000 applications for roles, London-based organizations last year, and culminating in over 2,200 placements for London organizations. So kind of operating at scale. I'll stop there. There's loads more I could say, but I'll stop there for the minute.
Thanks, Janet, for that introduction. And I know that Reach obviously has that broad overview of the sector, you know, particularly from a skills-based volunteering piece. Would you be able to kind of get into a little bit more detail for us around kind of what works, what you're seeing as working in terms of recruiting volunteers, and perhaps also once we've got those volunteers, how are you seeing, you know, successful retention happening in the sector?
Sure. I can talk more to the recruitment than I can to the retention, although I have thoughts about the retention as well.
Okay.
But basically, I think that I know that all the evidence is saying that volunteer recruitment is a significant problem, right? So I really recognize it's a real challenge for a lot of organizations. But I would like to say at the same time that there is a really large appetite to volunteer. We had 14,000 people sign up to volunteer through Reach last year. And that is more than 3 times the volumes we were having pre-pandemic. And actually, the volumes are growing, even growing this year, or even higher. So there is a real appetite to volunteer for sure. We are, and they're a diverse bunch of volunteers as well, by the way. It's over half identify as being from global majority, and the 2 biggest age bands are 20 to 30 and 30 to 40. So the volunteers are there. And I think the challenge is, I guess, it's connecting with them, and it's also giving them ways where they can really clearly see how they can make a difference. So there's so much evidence from the science that people really want to feel a sense of connection to a wider purpose, right? That's a really important part for people's well-being. So I guess what we're seeing is where organizations are really good at articulating what difference they make and what difference the volunteer could make. They are really, and they've got that really clearly articulated in a way that communicates well, because people aren't always that good at selling their own organization. Those organizations are particularly successful at attracting volunteers. So that's one of the key things that we're seeing that works really well. And in terms of, I did see there was a lot of comments in the Menti poll about volunteers staying, and I appreciate, you know, volunteers often are coming at a moment of transition, and they sometimes leave. So I think there's a couple of things I would say to that. One is that the evidence is that if you really focus on purpose and contribution, rather than saying join us and you'll get something out of it, the evidence is that the volunteers are more likely to stay for longer because they're more deeply bought into it. So that's one thing to note. So kind of, although the temptation is, you know, to feel a bit desperate and say, come and join us and we'll give you this and, you know, you'll get that out of it, it's much better to focus on the purpose. But the second thing I would encourage, this is probably specifically for skills-based volunteering, but is to try and chunk it up. So you can be ambitious in terms of what skills you're asking for, but don't, you know, a classic scenario is a small organization saying, come and do our marketing. We just need marketing done. What you really need is to sort of chunk it up and go, come and do a top-line marketing strategy for us. And then, or, you know, break it into chunks, basically, either into steps of a process or into bite-sized bits. Then it will seem less overwhelming for the potential volunteer. It means if they do need to leave at an earlier point, it's more likely to have had something really useful done that can be handed over to the next person. You know, so it's basically, to break it down is probably my kind of, and make it really clear the impact that the volunteer will make. Those are probably my 2 tips for starters.
Lovely. That's really helpful. You're sort of touching on those key points, which is about really understanding our volunteers, what's motivating them, and the causes, being able to tell that story about what difference they will make. I think that's kind of a key message there. And when you're talking about that, chunking it up, making it easy for people to see what contribution their time will make. And I guess once you get people in, then you can develop, work with them and see what other opportunities might suit them and what more they can provide. That makes me think a little bit as well, obviously you're a leading recruiter of trustees. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you approach the kind of the trustee piece as well?
I mean, the first thing is recruit openly. It's still a minority of charities that recruit trustees through open recruitment. And if you have, if you want to, one, reach out to the range of people with the skills you need, but two, crucially as well, I mean, diversity is such a big problem on boards, a lack of diversity. So you really need to recruit openly and recruit beyond your own networks if you want to increase the diversity of your board. We've got actually our flagship guidance thing is a trustee recruitment cycle, which is like an end-to-end resource for how to recruit trustees, right from the reflecting on who's already sitting around your board table, who isn't, maybe why, reflecting on why it's maybe some groups are underrepresented, thinking about those barriers. Right from that reflection point, we've got diversity audits that you can use. We've got the whole range, skills audits, everything, right through then thinking, okay, who do we need to prioritize in our recruitment for the board, and then how do we develop a compelling campaign, and then how do we reach out in a targeted way, and then how do we make sure that the process itself is inclusive, but also critically as well, that we're really selecting candidates who are the right people for the board as well, who do care, share the values, who genuinely understand what the role is, and right through to then how do we support and induct new trustees, particularly people always think trustees, you need to have someone with previous experience. You totally don't. What you're looking for is a trustee board is a collective, right? So it's a team sport. You need different people with different skills and experiences on that board to have a really strong board. So yeah, particularly like how do you reach out to people who maybe never thought about being a trustee before, explain to them what it is so they don't go into it unknowing, because it is a legal responsibility, and then how do you support them on that journey? So yeah, that's kind of yeah.
Yeah, that trustee cycle is a really clear process, isn't it, in terms of how you're shaping and really understanding what you need for your board and how your organizational needs and the support that you're looking for. Can you just talk a little bit about what you see the impact of good recruitment in trustees and in the skills-based volunteering space? What you feel are the key impacts for organizations if they focus on this type of volunteer recruitment?
Oh, wow. So on trustee recruitment, we know from our surveys, I mean, it can just be transformational for a board. I mean, obviously it doesn't always, but it can be totally transformational. So, a board which have been maybe just a group of people who kind of know each other quite well, and then even just the process of doing really intentional recruitment and thinking through what does the organization need strategically, where are the gaps, that process can be actually a kind of process of, I was going to say renewal, but at least really clarifying your strategy as an organization as a whole. But then having someone on board who's bringing fresh perspective and external challenge, it can completely change that dynamic of a board. So the impact can be really huge. Don't underestimate how much, because it can feel like a lot of work, but the difference that a really good trustee can make, or a couple of trustees, is just huge. And then having a really good board is so important. My goodness, I know so many organizations who are struggling because they have got difficult boards, or boards who just aren't really fulfilling their role. And at this time where it's a hard time for the sector, you really need a board that is helpful, not one that isn't. So that's on that side. On the skills-based volunteering, it's so hard to generalize, right? Because our biggest user group now, amazingly, and this is something else that's changed since the pandemic, is now organizations with no staff at all. Which isn't to say that we don't have plenty of others, but that's the fastest growing group. So the impact for them of a skills-based volunteer is obviously what they're really doing is essentially recruiting their team, right? So so it depends on what they're trying to do, but it's essential to what they're doing. With medium-sized organizations, sometimes it's like it gives you the ability to, well, it can be anything like upgrade, this is a classic one, right? A medium-sized organization will come and say, we want someone to do a new logo for us. And then someone with really good marketing expertise will be like, well, okay, actually, what is the brand identity? What are you trying to communicate? And they'll take them through that whole process of thinking through what they want to communicate and then how to communicate it really consistently and well. So it's not just a logo, it's a whole piece there, and it's really interesting watching this. So the impact of that can be huge, and then they leave, and the organization's got not just a new logo, but they've got branded templates and brand guidelines and just a much better way of communicating. So it really does vary according to the organization and what they're after, but it can be in terms of innovations, new projects, or just bringing in a level of specialism that you would never be able to afford or even budget for, even if you got a grant, because it's just kind of would be out of kilter with the rest of the organization. You can find that level of expertise in a volunteer, and it can be transformational. We've just done some data analysis that we never would have, and it became a whole project, and we never would have even considered doing that. We didn't even realize we could do that with our data, but thanks to a data volunteer, they kind of just took it to the next level. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. And I'm sure we'll kind of get into kind of ways in which to retain those skill-based volunteers as we kind of move through the panel. I'd like to open it up now, if that's okay. And I'm sure Janet will be able to share details of how to get involved with Reach. I'm sure Natalie will do that in the follow-up. No doubt many of you on the call are already using Reach's services. It's a very well-placed online digital platform. And I know that Carol, I think you've been working with Reach. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're recruiting volunteers and what's your approach at the AVOCADO Foundation?
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. I mean, a number of the things you said, I resonate with. I really want to caveat what I'm saying with the fact that we've only been around for 10 years. And in that time, our growth really started in 2020. So in many ways, because we're still under £1 million in terms of turnover, we would be classified as a small organization, nonprofit. So just bear that in mind. So to date, all our trustees have been recruited based on who knows who. We've literally used the 6 degrees of separation. So mostly personal recommendations, but we found that has helped so much because of the people who were on it, who were quite professional. So the initial trustees were my contacts, and then they brought their contacts. But what really happened at one point was that we stopped and we did a skills audit. And that helped us identify the areas where we needed people. And so these professionals went out to their networks and kind of introduced, trusted people that we could work with. And that's how they came in. As a result, what we've noticed is that everyone who's come on board has literally wanted to stay for 2 terms, served and been very, very involved. Having said that, we do wrap, our trustee recruitment as well as our volunteer recruitment in a life cycle that also mirrors what we do for our staff. It starts with, first of all, the recruitment, when they come in, the language we use. Janet is right, emphasizing the mission and the vision is really helpful. But we've also found that for many people, they're motivated by something. And so when we move to interview stage, and yes, we interview every single person, trustee, volunteer, it doesn't matter who it is. It's a little bit more light touch for volunteers, than it is for staff or trustees. So we kind of, if it's a trustee, it'll be myself and another trustee. If it's a member of staff, it'll be the line manager and somebody from SLT. And that's usually 2 stages. For a volunteer is usually 1 stage. So we've kind of done that. But during the interview process, we always want to know not just what it is they're applying for, but what they want to get out of the experience. Very often that very quickly tells us how we can curate the experience to make sure that it's mutually beneficial. And then also we make sure that we get recommendations because, it's not just anybody that comes in, but once they do, before they start, we make sure they have a robust induction. Nobody starts work unless you're a contractor, without going through the induction, because we find that when they understand what we do, it helps them better. It builds on it, gets them excited, and they meet other people, and they're more likely to want to contribute meaningfully, but also adopt the practices and the culture that already exists within the organization. There are three main types of volunteers that we see. They're those who we call experience seekers. So they're really eager to gain real world experience, build their portfolio, or maybe engage in a project-based or short-term role where they can apply and grow their skills. We don't mind, we'll welcome them. And for us, we're very happy to have that initial conversation and say, okay, fine, if that's what you're looking for and you want something on your CV, how about we say you're working on this? A good example will be the person who helped with our branding. This was somebody actually that was introduced by somebody who's working with us on the software development side. It was her cousin. He knew we were rebranding, and he said, look, my cousin's really great at this. She's in between jobs at the moment. She's on a different continent, but I'm sure that's fine because all of us are based all over the place. Would you have her? We said yes. And then we agreed that she would help with the branding. Very specific. There was a timeline, and she literally contributed more than £25,000 of work if we had paid for it to us. But then once she finished that, she paused and she went on. She found a job by that time. She carried on what she's doing. She's very recently again re-engaged with us because she's now settled at work, but still loves being part of the World Changer family, as we call ourselves. So those are the experience seekers. We also have people, who are very much, to be honest, sometimes it's blurred. You have periodic experts. Sometimes you have people who just want a longer term, but regular contributions. Say, they're settled in what they're doing, but they just want to give back. And for them, it's really, I can give you 1 or 2 hours a week. So we're really flexible about this. But from our experience, in the last year, or from 2023, beginning of 2023 to date, we've recruited about 43 volunteers, many of them from Reach Volunteering, and a lot more word of mouth or recommendations. But they're also the people that we spot. So we're at an event, we're talking to somebody, they express love with the mission, and we suggest to them that maybe you might want to connect with us in that way, and very often that works. The final thing I want to say is this. Two things. One, when somebody comes and they apply for one thing, during the interview stage, very often we'll spot that they're probably better off doing something. And we find this a lot with those who come to us from the platform. They might apply to, so a recent example was somebody who said they wanted to be a finance volunteer, but during the interview stage, we noticed that they were stronger in data analytics, something we need desperately, and something that we could see that their eyes lit up every time they talked about it. And so we kind of suggested to them that maybe that's how they could contribute, and they were very happy with that. So it's the flexibility, for us, that really works quite well. So, final thing to say really is that we have volunteers from everywhere. We're really flexible. We appreciate them so much, and we try to do things where we're recognizing and constantly staying in touch. But yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about the challenges in a bit. So I'll just pause there.
Thank you, Carol. I think you sort of touched upon some of those things. As it was Janet was talking about chunking, being able to be clear about what people can do. I like the kind of way you were kind of profiling away in your volunteers. You've got experience seekers and you know what they might be and what to expect for them and what might suit them, or you have these periodic experts, and kind of thinking flexibly about where you need volunteers in the organization. Recruitment. Let's continue on this subject. Ellie, you talked at the beginning very briefly about the kind of immense success you've had recently in getting volunteers into your program. Can you tell us a little bit about what's been really working for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've tried lots of different things over the past year, and I think that's really key to volunteer recruitment, is really diversifying your methods and not just going with one way. It's really trying lots of different things, and then that way you can reach a more I guess, diverse group of volunteers, perhaps. So I guess firstly, there's more traditional recruitment methods, so don't underestimate those. So that's the, the volunteer sites, and I guess sites like Reach Volunteer, which we use as well, to really get the role out there. And we also attend volunteer fairs and things like that. And we do find that we kind of can reach a more diverse group of volunteers by attending those events. For us as well, it's really important to think about where these volunteers might be going. So I'm kind of talking here as like, before they know about us, like where can we find them? Where are they going? Where we can kind of put our organization in front of them and kind of get them to know about us and what the role is. For us, we wanted to recruit specifically volunteers with lived experience, so lived experience of forced migration, to mentor the young people on our program. So we thought, okay, where might they be going? And so we reached out to refugee organisations within London, who they might be accessing their service. And so we worked alongside them to really get our role out across this community. And that has resulted in us being able to recruit more volunteers with lived experience. Another thing that we've also tried is, it's really interesting to see in that Mentimeter that a lot of people do get their volunteers through word of mouth, and that's the same for us. So we really looked at ways that we can harness this, and so we kind of think of our volunteers as ambassadors, and so naturally they often go out and talk about what they're doing and their role and the impact they feel it's making. But to kind of really strengthen this, we created comms packs. So I guess a really seamless and easy way for volunteers to just copy and paste a message, put it on their WhatsApp groups or on their work intranets. Maybe graphics and photos that they can share, to really make that process easier for them. And that's really helped us in getting more volunteers through word of mouth. Also, I guess, which is very an obvious ones, but social media. So we really kind of utilize this a lot, and I think it's about thinking about how you're using this as a tool, and what content is going to be really engaging for kind of prospective volunteers. So we do a lot of case studies, and we do a lot of kind of content showing volunteers and our current volunteers and using their voice as well, and really looking at how we can inspire people, because a lot of our volunteers do come via social media. And we also really recently created a promotional video, which involves lots of our volunteers and young people talking about their experiences, and that's been a really engaging tool as well. And I guess finally, we've also been trialing, more corporate partners, or corporate partnerships rather. So we recognise that a lot of, there might be a lot of people who feel like they're not really making a social impact in their day-to-day, and they're really missing that in what they're doing, and so are kind of wanting to do something to help their communities. So we will sometimes go into kind of corporate and companies who want to partner with us, and we will kind of put forward our volunteer role as something they can get involved in. And this has been a relatively new thing for us, but we are starting to get quite a few volunteers this way. It doesn't always work, just because sometimes corporates, they might say, okay, we can just do, 1 day a month, and that doesn't really work with our model. So it is just about thinking about how we can be flexible, and it might not work for your organization, but if it does, then it's a great way of getting volunteers. And then I guess just beyond that point, so once they've found us and they've applied, we really try and make that recruitment process seamless as possible. We, as well as Carol, we interview all of our volunteers. We also invite a young person to be part of that interview panel, so they help us decide who's going to be a volunteer mentor at Hope for the Young. And I think this really helps us see I guess, how they interact with young people, and it also helps them kind of understand the role a bit better and what it involves. I think having an interview kind of formalizes it a bit more than if it were just kind of a phone conversation. And so, yeah, those are kind of broadly the areas in which we kind of recruit our volunteers currently, and how we've been able to kind of double in size over the past year.
Thank you, Ellie. I think, that kind of piece around equipping you know, our passionate volunteers to be ambassadors for us, to go out. And I think, you know, being able to provide them with that content. I did have a question around content. Creating video content, you know, it's something that everybody wants to do, and, you know, it is a great way to engage people. How are you managing to kind of resource that? Are you bringing it? These can be difficult things to put together if you're a small charity. How are you doing that? It would be helpful to know.
It is. It's always difficult. I think that's always the thing that kind of goes on the back burner is you know, is the kind of creating content. We are a small organization, but we do have a communications and fundraising officer. So it's her role to be I guess gathering this content as much as possible. And again, even with that, it can sometimes be hard because it relies on other members of the team feeding in that content. So you know, we create like a channel where, you know, we'll put good news stories or anything that we think that would be helpful for her to use. We have also and yeah, I guess interesting what Janet was saying is around really kind of chunking up you know, tasks and kind of helping that, and that's about helping volunteering opportunities. So in the past, we've recruited or taken on young people as volunteers. So young people love social media, they're very creative, and they have very innovative ways about how to communicate things on social media. So in the past, they've helped us create this content, and that's been a really good development opportunity for us, but also as a way of utilizing their skills. And, you know, that might not be something that everyone can do within their organization, but we do find I don't know, it's a kind of really meaningful way of platforming what we do. So yeah, it's not always easy. So it kind of relies on staff capacity, but also, I guess, identifying where you could maybe take on a volunteer who could support with creating that. And I think once you have kind of certain structures and formats, it can then be easier. You know, we might have like a template, you know, graphic that we use, and then it just becomes easier to kind of push that content out.
Lovely, thank you. Janet's I'm just kind of looking at the kind of the recruitment process, which you touched upon, and which Carol as well, about kind of interviewing. And obviously it depends on the roles. Some people are kind of just welcoming people in to do some, you know, light touch volunteering, but other roles are much more kind of require more commitment and time. And so the recruitment process should be appropriate, but obviously, as Janet is saying, it's about that smooth welcoming process, and it's obviously about just being responsive to people, you know, recognizing they want to get involved, and, you know, being able to kind of give them some expectation around when you will be able to kind of talk to them about their volunteering. I'm going to go to Maddy at Family Volunteering Club. I'd love to hear from you about kind of how you're approaching the topic, particularly in terms of recruiting and perhaps also accessibility, which is also a really important piece, which we are kind of, it is coming through in our conversation. But how are you doing that? How are you working through that at Family Volunteering Club?
Yeah, so I mean, brilliant inputs from the other panelists. I've been furiously scribbling down ideas, and so thank you for sharing. So Family Volunteering Club, we're a little bit different, I suppose, in the sense that, so obviously, as it says on the tin, our work is about engaging families in volunteering, and specifically children aged 0 to 9 and their grown-ups. And now, you know, there was some NCVO research out a few years ago which showed that people volunteer, and then after they have a child, there's a massive drop-off rate because they just, you know, time pressures become different, etc. And so sort of recognizing that, we are, you know, the benefits of involving families are twofold. One is you've got this whole range of parents and carers who have great skills and experience that they can bring to your organization. So if you can find an accessible way of bringing them in where they can actually have their child with you, you can benefit from that skills. And then for the kids, having that engagement with children who are inquisitive and curious and ask questions and have fresh ideas and energy and perspective is really cool as well. And also really that's about playing the long game. You know, I think the charities we work with and the sessions we create, they are practical. The children go in and there's a beginning, middle and end. They make a difference by the time they finish that session, whether that's packing up food parcels at a food bank, whether that's sorting out bags of clothes at a homeless charity, whether that's planting a load of bulbs for ready for spring next year. There is a very practical task they're doing. They're the sort of tasks that grown-ups could probably do a lot quicker. However, by working with children, you're also nurturing that next generation of volunteers. So there's a lot of brilliant research that shows how important it is we get to children when they are those ages to introduce them to volunteering, because there's a statistic that says if they're introduced before the age of 10, they're more than twice as likely to have that habit in later life, etc. So you're sort of playing the long game a little bit more with children, but it is a brilliant kind of space to be working in. So yes, exactly like we've been talking about. So for us, our sessions are fully accessible for children. Everything is thought about with them in mind. They're 90 minutes long, which is not too short, not too long. There's a game at the beginning to get them all their energy up. And then at the end, we have a snack and story time, which is very popular, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we make it a really fun activity session. And then there's about 1 hour in the middle, 50 minutes to 1 hour to do one task, usually 2 or 3 tasks, because kids do get bored. So we curate those activities to be whatever we think the kids will like. So it's just bearing in mind things like, making sure the task is appropriate and it's safe, making sure that the tools the kids are going to be using are the age appropriate, mini high-vis jackets, mini trowels, mini all this kind of stuff. And making sure that it's really fun as well, because kids are very honest. They will stand up and go, I'm bored. So you've got to make sure that they kind of are having a great time. And I think also for us, we're a little bit different in the sense that families can sign up for one session and never come back again. Happy to say most people do come back, but there's no minimum pressure. So I think that is a slightly different thing to maybe some people in the room who are obviously looking for kind of longer term commitments, but that's just the way that we find works in terms of engaging our families. But like I say, most families come back multiple times to engage with the different types of programs, and then they become advocates and ambassadors for that charity and that organization. And so we've had a family who came along to a lot of our families have never been to the host charities before, so they'll come along and the grown-ups will suddenly go, oh, I didn't know this was here. Oh, cool, they've got a Christmas fair, we can help out. Oh, they're doing a fundraising campaign, we can support that. So it's just a really good way of introducing them to the kind of what's on their doorstep as well.
That's a really interesting kind of practical way of getting people to know about the different kind of organizations that are out there doing great work, and almost like a kind of recruitment pipeline tool for some organizations in a way.
Very long potentially, but
it's a long one. But I think it's an interesting approach. And you talk about the practical volunteering piece, where people are coming along and giving their time to see a task that's completed. How do you recognize, if we kind of shift away from looking at recruitment, we've had some brilliant inputs, how do you recognize and celebrate the contributions of your volunteers, Maddy?
So we, on the day, we make a fuss of the kids. We give them a thank you sticker at the end, which they love. We encourage them to come back. We do, like I say, we do snack time. We sort of make sure that they have a brilliant time, so they want to come back, and that experience has been a positive one for them. We also ask for feedback after every session. With the grown-ups get emailed. Something that we are going to be doing, but are not doing yet, is we want to create like little almost passports, so kids have, and they can get kind of stamps for the more volunteering they do, so they can kind of fill up their book, and maybe when they've done 10 sessions they get a little reward, or 20 sessions and they get, so that's something that we're developing at the moment to kind of build that retention, a bit like the park run model, if people are familiar with that. So I think it's, we always want to recruit volunteers. They volunteer because they care about the cause and the passion, but being able to kind of sort of just treat them as well as possible and help them have a brilliant experience, I think is sort of central to what we do. But open to hearing other people's thoughts and ideas on it as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a key, isn't there, around retention, which is around how we look after our volunteers, how we work with them, how we develop them, how we engage with them in the work that we do, and obviously how do we celebrate and recognize and the value and contribution they make. Carol, would you like to kind of talk about your approach at AVOCADO around retaining volunteers?
Yeah, thank you. So, earlier on, I began to allude to the fact that we don't treat them as a monolith. So the first thing is finding out what's is motivating the person, whether they're, a short-term contributor, whether they are a periodic expert, or whether indeed, what they want to do with us is be that thrill-seeking volunteer. Whatever it is, we kind of match it to the experience, so we curate that for them. But we find that encouraging people to join in as part of the team, if they can, is really helpful. Once a week, we have a team meeting where everyone, no matter where they're based around the world, joins, and we make that clear from the beginning. This is the day team meeting happens, and everyone kind of shares what's happening, with their own little bit of work. We find that that's really helpful for keeping people engaged, keeping them in the loop, and keeping them highly motivated and really growing in their passion for the work. We've also got a quarterly strategy day. Again, when we put out the invitations, we make sure that those go out to volunteers as well. So, but for volunteers, is really optional whether they attend those things, because we work with them. We just take as much as they're willing to give. Now, in terms of recognition, apart from recognizing their rewards, well, I would hope that whoever's line managing them is making sure that we're publicly acknowledging them. But aside from that, every so often, in collaboration with them and conversation with them, we ask them what they would like us to do. And so for the person who did our branding, we did a whole social media campaign, just not only shouting about what they did, but also encouraging other people. And for them, that's a timestamp on the internet that they can always go back to. And I know that that filled them with joy. For some of them, we work with them to see what it is they want to achieve. Some people just want a personal recommendation for a job, but whatever good times we have as an organization, we also make sure they're part of that. So team dinners, annual picnic, everything that's happening with the team, we make sure that they're also involved with that. When we used to have quarterly Secret Santa, although we call it Secret Angel, gift exchanges, and it started during the pandemic as part of our well-being program. We also involve them with that. And if they're part of the rhythm with us, we also check in on their well-being and make sure that we're checking in to see how they're doing. So yeah, these are some of the things that we do to recognize and reward them. In terms of retention, again, we only work with people and take what they're willing to give. We adopt a flexible approach. Some people want to dip in and out. Some people want to give you a short-term bust, and some people want to just keep going. So yeah, but we just make sure that they're part of that cycle. Their line manager will hopefully meet with them weekly, because we have like a check-in, everyone with your direct reports weekly. Monthly, there's a PDR, those sort of things, and we just keep people involved and allow them the flexibility that they need.
Lovely, thank you, Carol. So, it's that inclusion piece, it's around being supported in their role, and it's also about sort of recognizing them, but also being flexible, and that kind of really having an understanding of what their role is and what they're going to do, and being clear about their role description. Ellie, do you have anything to add around how you're approaching kind of the piece around retaining volunteers? And I'm just conscious of time. We're probably going to overrun a little bit, so probably we're going to kind of continue the panel till about 12:05. So we've got still some time, but just wanted to give us a bit of a timekeeping check.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief then. I mean, it's very much the same as what Maddy and Carol have been saying. Really kind of, well, I guess first of all for us, it's really about finding out why people leave us, like why do they want to stop volunteering, and really looking into that. So, are you capturing that data anywhere? And if not, how can you start capturing that? So then you can then start to think, okay, what can we do to tackle this? Obviously, there are some things are just beyond our control, but are there any things that you can do to make that role more flexible, and can you adapt it in any way? For example, for us, you know, we just did the face-to-face 6-month mentoring role, and then, you know, we were finding that we were losing really passionate people at the end because maybe they're moving away or life gets in the way or they've had a baby or something. So we've now created a kind of online mentoring role. So that's something new that we've started doing, and it's really helped us retain our amazing volunteers. Again, it's around that kind of personalized support. I think it's really trying to make sure that they have a really positive experience with us when, you know, when they are volunteering. So we make sure that every volunteer has a one-to-one coordinator support. They meet regularly, and I think that just gives it a more kind of personalized approach. It makes them feel valued. You know, they are one volunteer in a kind of a massive group of volunteers, but I think trying to personalize the things and kind of giving that one-to-one touch wherever possible really helps. And then also for us, it's around kind of creating that community spirit. So we do regular social events. We do a big annual appreciation event. And we know that volunteers love doing this. They love coming together and connecting. And it's just a way of us kind of being able to show our appreciation for them. You know, we've thought a lot of you know, we sometimes hear organizations doing kind of volunteer of the month and that kind of thing. We personally would find this so hard because all of our volunteers are amazing and doing such brilliant work. So we have tried doing a volunteer spotlights, which we find is a really nice way of kind of spotlighting certain volunteers. And we are kind of asked for them to give their top tips to other volunteers within the organisation. And we kind of do a piece on social media once a month around this. And that's just a really nice way of kind of highlighting the amazing work that our volunteers are doing and just helping them to feel appreciated and importantly, like they have a voice within the organisation.
Lovely, thank you. It's that building that culture, isn't it? You know, of our volunteers and the contributions they make, and they feel part of something. And when people feel part of something, they like to do more. They just like to. I think it really helps them connect with that mission as well, and also with the people that, you know, they're engaging with through the services that they're supporting. Just would like to touch upon some of the barriers that we have. How do we make volunteering accessible? You know, sometimes it can be a challenge. Geography, some of the challenges that were coming up earlier, could be a challenge of, you know, having a volunteer pool nearby, removing barriers around kind of accessibility within the activities or digital barriers. Can I ask who would like to speak to this? Perhaps Maddy, would you like to kind of connect in on this?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think so for our families, they are sort of time poor and they have so we've designed the program to happen. So we do midweek sessions, for example, for under fives and their carers, and then we do weekend and holiday sessions for the sort of primary, you know, the broader primary age group. I think so sort of I think the things that I'm probably just saying what's really obvious, but the three things I would say in terms of accessibility for us is, first of all, talking to the people you're trying to engage. Actually, so at the beginning of every process, we every time we start a new program, we talk to our families. When do you want to do it? What are the practical things? What time of the day? All those things, like how long should the sessions be? Where would you want to be? How far will you travel? We ask all these questions to our families. What are the causes you would like to spend your time giving to? What would you like your kids to learn about? So we ask all of that. So we've got all this amazing, and then we build the program from that, which sounds really obvious, but I think can sometimes just be overlooked when you're trying to build when you're trying to build a program. You can often, it's tempting to rush to step 2, which is just making it, isn't it? So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is time, and if it doesn't go right the first time, don't be disheartened. If you're trying to do something new and innovative for the organization in terms of how you work, it does take, you know, it takes a bit of time potentially to get the word out, to build that new way of working. And so give yourself time. Don't worry if it fails a few times or if you need to refine it. You know, like the model we've got is it's not rocket science, but it's taken a bit of time to craft. And then the third thing for us is, particularly bearing in mind we work for families, is making it fun and making it memorable. And I absolutely love what the other panelists have been talking about this tailored, personalized approach to it. I know that is time consuming, but that is how you get better retention ultimately. I was last week I did a session, and my son came along with me, and we were planting bulbs with obviously with a group, and he planted a load of bulbs. And I said to him, I said, do you want to plant any more bulbs? He said, no, I'm now digging a hole to Australia. And I said, are you sure you don't want to dig any more, put any bulbs in the hole? No, I'm digging a hole to Australia. Okay, cool, sweet. So he then spent the next 10 minutes digging a hole to Australia. And the point is that, like, it would have been easy for me to go, no, you absolutely have to do this, and kind of stamp down on that. Like, and obviously he's a kid, so it's slightly different, but you just trying to just be a bit more open and flexible to how people want to experience the role, I think is really important, to sort of put their enjoyment kind of as a real priority.
Thanks, Maddy. Yeah, I think that's, you're talking about that personal touch, which leads me on. And I think it would be really helpful to get everybody's kind of feedback around this, which was something that came out of the Menti questions. Challenges is around capacity. How do we manage this challenge? How do you manage the capacity issue? Because volunteering takes management. It's like having, additional resources that require support and management and looking after, and for us to make it that really powerful piece, and to keep our volunteers engaged, we have to kind of spend that time doing it. How do we do it? And what's your experience and advice from your type of organization? Can we perhaps, Janet, would you be able to speak to kind of some thoughts and insights around this?
Yeah, I mean, this is such an age-old problem. It's always been the case, right? You kind of, it's a catch-22, isn't it? You don't have the capacity. You need volunteers because you don't have the capacity, and then you don't have the capacity to recruit and manage volunteers. So there's not, I haven't got a silver bullet, you'll be unsurprised to know. But what I would say is, I do think kind of, I think if you just take the basic principles, I think people have been really eloquent about this, it's a conversation between you and a volunteer as to how it's going to be mutually a great thing to work together. Then they're more likely to stay, and they're more likely, be really clear about what you need, and they be clear about what they want, and come up with something which works for everybody. The management will just be so much less of an issue in that, if you set it up, if you design it to set it up to work, it's going to be much less of a challenge. I think you have to kind of, I was reflecting on the issue of volunteers leaving. And obviously, I think, Carol, for example, spoke really eloquently about kind of make them feel part of the team, because they are part of the team, value them genuinely, show how you value them, and they're more likely to stay, right? But there is something about, volunteers, they will have other commitments, in their lives, which they will have to prioritize. You are going to have a higher, well, I was about to say you're going to have a higher attrition rate of volunteers. But having said that, we've got volunteers at Reach who have been with us for like 25 years, over longer than any members of staff. So it's not always the case, but there will be a throughput. So, but design how you're working with them in a way that can accommodate that you're going to lose a few people. Don't make any of it mission critical so that you're lost. You're left. You hear these stories of a web designer leaving a charity in the lurch, and then that, make sure, think about that, build that into the design, make it a team, chunk it up so that if someone does leave, then you're, you still got something really useful, and they can go away leaving good as well. So I think it's, I've now totally forgotten what the question was. Have I talked off on a totally different tangent? I'm sorry.
No, not at all, Janet. We were talking about capacity and
capacity. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you just have to try, and I think the gain, right, is that volunteers can increase your capacity. So I've got a brilliant quote from someone who gave it to us when we were doing a bit of user research, and he said, a skills-based volunteer can do well in 30 minutes what it takes us to do badly in 2 weeks. And I just thought, and that really resonated with me, because we've got volunteers ourselves who have come and helped us do things in a really effective way like that. So it's a bit of an investment. Don't skimp on the investment of time when you're setting it up, because otherwise it will just be a drain on your capacity. So spend a bit of time being really thoughtful up front when you're designing it and thinking about how to set the relationship up, and then it will bring you extra capacity. But it's tough,
I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, that kind of investment of the time at the beginning, really thinking about how volunteers add to your organization, will build your organization, how you need to work with them, and kind of having a really clear understanding of that, so that you can have those conversations more easily when you are speaking to them and people are getting engaged. Carol, very quickly, do you have any kind of insights around the capacity piece?
Just to be perfectly honest, unless you've got unlimited resources, you're very unlikely to get this right. But I want to just encourage people to just keep learning. Somebody talked about that. We have, when we can, we have an exit interview for volunteers who are finishing with us. And every so often we do a survey and say, are you still on board? So we won't carry like a list of 200 names. We will tell you how many active volunteers we have at every point in time, every quarter, because we know that life changes. So I want to say, you know, cutting ourselves some slack, but also keeping them as part of the journey. Make certain that, you know, everybody is aware. We treat them the same way. You know, if your well-being season that week is winter, for instance, we expect whoever is line managing you to check in and see what's happening. But the final thing I want to say is, especially around being left in a lurch. I mean, the one thing that we make sure we try as much as possible to do is really apply the RACI principle. You may have heard about it, you know, responsible, accountable, communication, you know, all of those things, but also the S for those who did do the RASCI instead of RACI is support, you know, making sure that people have the support they need. But then because we're very tech driven as well, one of the things that we keep trying to do is make sure that people don't have more access than their level. So a volunteer will never be, for instance, you know, global administrator. They might have a high level of IT, and in fact, we do have an IT volunteer who's been supporting us massively in that area, but they can never lock us out and just go and nobody knows what they're doing. So volunteers are always accountable to somebody, always, and we know what they're doing. So I hope that helps.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Ellie, do you have anything to kind of, given that you've kind of had such a growth in volunteering, how are you managing the kind of the capacity piece around?
Yeah, so I'll talk more about kind of the kind of capacity in terms of our mentoring, also our volunteer coordinators, and like just being able to provide that kind of one-to-one support that we know is so valuable. You know, we often find that certain volunteers might take up more of our time than others, and that's just kind of it will naturally happen. And so for us, we've really looked at how can we kind of increase their capacity to allow them to provide that kind of more one-to-one support to our volunteers. So we've recently looked at kind of the recruitment admin side, which is often very time consuming, and we've taken on another youth volunteer, so one of the young people who are on our mentoring programs, to kind of support us with that and with that whole process. So she has now been volunteering with us for the past few months and supports with a lot of the kind of admin around you know, setting up volunteers. And so I guess that's one piece of advice, is just looking to see, okay, what could potentially a volunteer do and support with that capacity. And the other thing that we've also looked at is really streamlining the whole process. So, you know, some things can be a bit clunky and time consuming. So we've really looked at ways that we can automate things. So for instance, we've recently, when a volunteer is successful, we can kind of tick a box and they instantly get sent a welcome email from their designated coordinator with all the steps that they need to follow. And that just really kind of makes things a lot easier for the volunteer as well, and also for the coordinator. And that then allows them to kind of do more of that one-to-one support with volunteers on their caseload. So yeah, that's what we've tried, and you know what's working for us.
Lovely. I'm sure we could do a whole session on the use of technology and new technologies and systems and approaches to utilizing technology and a kind of building capacity and also supporting our recruitment processes. Very quickly, Maddy, do you have anything to add before I open up to the floor for some questions?
Do you know what? I don't think I do. I think I feel like it'd be nice to sort of open
Okay.
up. Yeah.